The studio hummed with nervous energy long before the cameras rolled. The View wasn't new to controversy, but everyone sensed this episode would be different. When the stage doors opened and Blake Shelton stepped out, boots echoing against the glossy floor, the audience erupted. Country charm, warm grin, a confident stride. Everything about him said this would be an easy, feel-good interview. He settled into his chair, crossing one leg casually. Opposite him, Joy Behar waited with a look that could slice through stage lights. Like, before we move on, don't forget to hit subscribe button. Blake, she began, her smile polite but tight. Your new album celebrates small-town values and traditional America. Some critics say that's just coded language for exclusion. How do you respond? The room fell still. Even the camera operators froze for a second. Blake tilted his head, his grin softening. Joy, that's an unfair take, he said evenly. When I sing about small towns, I'm talking about people looking out for each other, about hard work and family. That's not politics, that's life. Joy leaned forward, notes in hand. But when you sing about keeping things the way they were, you're romanticizing a past that wasn't good to everyone. Isn't that just nostalgia for inequality? A murmur rippled through the audience. Whoopi and the other hosts exchanged uneasy glances. Blake's expression hardened. The southern drawl in his voice grew stronger. You're reading something that isn't there, he said, his tone clipped but calm. My songs aren't about shutting people out. They're about what holds us together. Honesty, decency, loyalty, values that don't expire. Joy's voice sharpened. Come on, Blake. You wave flags, you praise the good old days, and you know exactly what that stirs up. You're sending a message, even if you won't admit it. Whoopi tried to cut in. Let's take a break. No, Whoopi, Joy snapped, eyes never leaving Blake. Let him answer. Blake sat up straight, patience thinning. I've spent my whole career bringing people together. At my shows, you'll see every race, every age, every walk of life singing the same lyrics. That's America to me. Joy didn't back down. Let's be honest, your fan base is mostly white, rural, conservative. When you sing about tradition, they hear hierarchy. When you sing about the way things used to be, they remember when others had to know their place. The air went cold. Even the crew stopped moving. Blake's jaw tightened. That's completely out of line, he said. You don't know me, and you don't know my fans. You're projecting your own bias onto them. Joy's smile vanished. What I know, she shot back, is that nostalgia for a whiter, simpler past still sells records, and you profit from it. Blake rose from his seat, the mic squealing with feedback. Gasps rippled across the audience. Producers waved frantically from the wings. I came here to talk about music, he said, voice cracking like thunder. Not to be ambushed by someone who's never set foot in the places I sing about. Don't accuse me of spreading hate when everything I do is about connection. Joy's tone turned icy. So I'm the problem? I ask questions and suddenly I'm attacking you? This is what happens when people like you get challenged. You play the victim. I'm not playing anything, Blake snapped, hands slicing the air. You're twisting my words and mocking millions of good people just because they don't live like you do. You sit in this New York studio and look down on them. Whoopi tried again. Let's cool it down. But Joy wasn't finished. Blake, my problem isn't your zip code. It's an industry that's excluded people for decades. And the fact that you're this angry proves I hit a nerve. What it proves, Blake shot back, is that you're so wrapped up in your righteousness, you can't hear anyone else. You think you're defending equality, but you're dividing the country more than my songs ever could. Some audience members clapped, others whispered. Security crept closer, uncertain if this was still an interview or the start of something worse. Joy stood now too, refusing to yield. You talk about unity, she said, voice trembling with emotion. "But you never acknowledge who got left out of those good old days. You profit off nostalgia without owning the pain behind it." Blake's eyes burned. "You keep saying profit, like I'm exploiting people. What I sing about is home. The people who raised me, the towns that built this country. That's not politics, Joy. That's pride." Joy's laugh was short and bitter. "Pride is fine, Blake, but not when it blinds you to progress. My agenda is equality, making sure when we celebrate America, we celebrate all of it, not just the parts that make you comfortable." For a moment, neither spoke. The crowd held its breath. The heat from the stage lights felt suffocating. Finally, Blake unclipped his mic, his voice lower but still fierce. "Maybe the problem isn't my music, Joy. Maybe it's that you can't see America unless it fits your script." He turned toward the wings as producers rushed forward, cutting to commercial. The audience erupted, some cheering, others booing, everyone stunned. When the lights dimmed, no one on set could quite believe what had just happened. It wasn't just an interview. It was a collision. Two visions of America, crashing live before millions of eyes. And as the control room buzzed with disbelief, one truth settled over the chaos. Daytime TV had never felt this raw. The studio fell into chaos the moment the cameras cut to commercial. Producers rushed forward, voices overlapping in a storm of panic. The audience buzzed with shock, a mix of gasps, whispers, and nervous laughter. Joy sat frozen in her chair, eyes down, fingers gripping the cue cards that had started it all. Across the stage, Whoopi stood silently, watching the wreckage unfold. No one spoke above a whisper, yet the tension still hung in the air like smoke after a fire. Backstage, Blake yanked the microphone cord from his collar, his movements sharp and angry. "I knew this was a setup," he muttered, his voice low but shaking. His publicist followed closely, pleading for calm. "Blake, just breathe. We'll handle it. Don't give them anything else to use." He didn't respond, just kept walking down the hallway toward his dressing room, jaw tight, eyes fixed ahead. He'd been in 100 interviews, but never one that felt like this. Not a conversation, but a trap. In the control room, screens flickered with replay clips, editors already bookmarking the exchange that would dominate the internet within minutes. One producer rubbed his temples. "This is going to break the morning shows," he said. "We're not cutting that segment." Another whispered, "We just made TV history." Out in the crowd, half the audience had their phones raised, recording the aftermath. Security gently urged them out as whispers turned into arguments between fans. Some defending Blake, others cheering Joy. The energy felt raw, unpredictable, like something greater than TV had just been cracked open. Blake's door slammed shut behind him. He threw his hat onto the counter and leaned against the mirror, breathing hard. His reflection stared back, the friendly face of a country star now shadowed by frustration. He wanted to laugh, or maybe yell, but all that came out was a whisper. "They don't get it. None of them do." His manager entered quietly. "They're already posting clips," she said. "It's everywhere." He turned toward her, eyes hard. "Then let it be. I'm not apologizing for being who I am." He sat down, rubbing his temples. "I write about people trying to live decent lives. If that offends someone, that's on them." On set, Joy finally stood. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was fading, leaving something else in its place: doubt. She gathered her papers, though her hands trembled slightly. "Did I go too far?" she asked quietly. Whoopi glanced at her, calm but tired. "You went where you always go," she said. "Sometimes it lands, sometimes it explodes." Joy sighed. "I wasn't trying to humiliate him. I just wanted honesty." "Maybe," Whoopi said. "But not everyone hears honesty the same way." When the show returned from break, the hosts tried to steer the energy back toward neutral ground. Whoopi took the lead, her tone firm but diplomatic. "Things got a little heated earlier," she said. "But that's what happens when you care about the conversation. We have respect for Blake, for his music, and for everyone watching who saw a little bit of themselves in that moment." The audience clapped hesitantly. But as soon as the credits rolled, phones began buzzing in every pocket. Clips looped endlessly. Blake standing, Mike squealing, Joy's sharp stare frozen in frame. The comments were merciless, split evenly between outrage and applause. In Nashville, fans packed into bars replaying the segment on giant screens. "He stood up for us," one man said, slamming his beer on the counter. "Finally, someone had the guts." Across the country, others watched the same footage and saw something different. "This is what happens," one woman said online, "when privilege gets challenged." By nightfall, news outlets were dissecting every second of the exchange. Late-night hosts joked about the day daytime TV turned into a cage match. Analysts debated whether it was bravery or meltdown. Everyone had an opinion, and no one was backing down. In his hotel room, Blake sat by the window, the city lights glowing beneath him. His phone buzzed non-stop with texts, calls, and notifications, but he ignored them all. Outside, New York looked distant, too loud, too bright, too far from the quiet places he sang about. He thought of the crowds who sang his lyrics back to him, the people who found comfort in his songs. That was his America. Not perfect, but real. "Maybe I should have just walked out sooner," he whispered to himself. Across the city, Joy sat in her apartment, the TV on mute. She scrolled through headlines, some praising her courage, others calling her cruel. None of them felt right. She set the phone down and stared out at the skyline. "Did I make a point?" she wondered aloud, "or just more noise?" The next morning, every network played the clip. Commentators on both sides called it everything from a cultural reckoning to a publicity stunt. The views ratings spiked to record highs. Blake's album shot up the charts overnight. Both had won, and both had lost. In the weeks that followed, the storm began to fade, leaving behind a trail of think pieces and memes. Blake returned to touring. Joy returned to hosting. Neither reached out to the other, though both thought about it more than they admitted. One evening, somewhere between two shows, Blake sat with his guitar, picking out a slow melody. The lyrics came easily this time. About misunderstandings, about standing your ground, about how people talk past each other when they really just want to be heard. It wasn't a protest song. It wasn't an apology. It was something in between. He played it quietly, not for the charts, not for the cameras, just for himself. And for a moment, as his voice carried through the empty room, the anger of that day finally started to dissolve into something softer, something closer to peace. A few weeks later, the noise had quieted but never really disappeared. Clips of that fateful interview still surfaced online, stitched into TikToks, debated in podcasts, quoted in political commentaries. Blake Shelton's face had become a symbol in a conversation he'd never meant to start. And Joy Behar's name trended every few days, each time sparking another round of praise and fury. Blake was back on the road, the rhythm of tour life grounding him again. Crowds greeted him with roaring cheers, louder than before. Every show sold out, but it didn't feel like victory. The lights, the applause, the familiar smell of beer and dust, they all felt different now. When he looked out at the audience, he wondered how many were cheering for the music, and how many were cheering for what they thought he represented. One night after a show in Dallas, he sat alone in his dressing room, still in his stage clothes. A knock came at the door, his guitarist Mike. "You good, man?" Blake didn't answer right away. He stared at his guitar leaning against the wall. "Funny thing," he said finally. "I've played these songs 1,000 times, but tonight they sounded heavier." Mike nodded, sensing it wasn't about the notes. Maybe people are just listening different now. Blake smiled faintly. Yeah, he said. Maybe that's the problem. Or maybe it's the point. In New York, Joy returned to her usual rhythm. Early calls, wardrobe, cue cards, bright lights. But she was quieter these days, more thoughtful between segments. Every time they brought up a controversial guest, she paused before asking the first question. The fire was still there, but it burned differently. Less like outrage, more like reflection. One afternoon during a production meeting, a young staffer hesitantly spoke up. You know, Joy, that moment with Blake, it got people talking. Like, really talking. My mom and I argued for days, but we actually listened to each other for once. Joy smiled at that. Then maybe it was worth it, she said softly. Later that evening, she sat in her apartment again, this time with the TV off. The city hummed outside, taxis, laughter, sirens blending into one restless song. She sipped her wine, looked at her phone, and hovered over Blake's name on the trending list. She didn't open it. She just stared for a moment, then set it down. Maybe one day, she murmured, we'll talk again, without the cameras. Back on tour, Blake was writing more than usual. One song in particular kept pulling him back. A slow, stripped-down ballad called Same Sky, Different Towns. The lyrics were simple, but they carried a kind of truth that came from the storm he'd weathered. It wasn't about defending himself anymore. It was about understanding. He recorded it late one night in a Nashville studio. Just him, his guitar, and the quiet hum of the recording booth. When he finished the last note, the sound engineer sat silently before saying, "That's the one." The song dropped without fanfare a month later. No interviews, no press tour, no music video, just the track. Within days, it climbed the charts, shared by people from every side of the argument. Some heard apology in the lyrics, others heard defiance. But everyone agreed it was different. Raw, honest, human. On The View, Whoopi mentioned it at the end of an episode. "Blake Shelton released a new song this week," she said, smiling slightly. "It's called Same Sky, Different Towns. Maybe that's something we could all use a little more of." Joy didn't speak, but she smiled too. She'd already listened to it that morning, alone in her kitchen. The melody was simple, the message clear. We may argue, fight, misunderstand, but we're still looking up at the same sky. For the first time in months, she felt something close to peace. A few weeks later, Blake performed the song live for the first time at a benefit concert. Cameras flashed, fans swayed, and for once, the air didn't feel divided. Halfway through the performance, he paused, glancing up from his guitar. "This one's for anybody who's ever been talked over, misunderstood, or judged too quick," he said. "That includes me." The crowd roared. For the first time since that fiery morning on The View, Blake felt the noise fade away, leaving only music, the thing that had always made sense when nothing else did. And somewhere in New York, Joy watched the performance replayed on her tablet. When the camera zoomed in on Blake's face, older, calmer, still proud, she nodded once and whispered, "Good for you, cowboy." Then she closed the screen, smiled to herself, and let the city lights fill the room. The storm had passed, but its echo would linger. Not as anger, not as shame, but as a reminder that sometimes the hardest conversations are the ones worth having. Because in the end, whether from a Nashville stage or a New York studio, they were both still trying to do the same thing. Tell the truth as they saw it, and hope the world was listening. If you like this video, then subscribe.